I discovered a family secret, which allowed me to escape my entitled mom and stepdad's abuse. My girlfriend recommended that I share this story because this is something that everyone would might enjoy. Growing up, I had thought that I had good relationship with my parents, mom and dad, stepdad, and my 3 younger siblings, YB1, YS, and YB2. However, around 5th grade, my relationship had begun to change. I had always exceeded at school, so my parents sent me to a private school that had really good test scores, and students had good placements in colleges later on. However, my last year, I was really excited to go on to a private middle school that all of my friends and I had gotten accepted into. Unfortunately, at that time, my parents sat me down and explained to me that they did not have the money to pay for my tuition and had to withdraw YB1 and YS's applications to the elementary school that I had gone to for the same reason. So, I would be enrolled in the local public middle school the following year. Towards the end of 5th grade, we were doing science class, and my teacher started our Intro to Genetics unit. That lesson has stayed with me since, because my appearance is so different compared to my parents. As of now, I'm in my 20s, and I share literally no features with my mom. So I started to begin asking my teacher some very difficult questions about genetics in class, and after answering which traits tend to be dominant, she realized where I was going and immediately shut me down. Over that summer, I read pretty much every book I could on the subject before I did something dumb. I went to my dad and asked him if I was adopted. This conversation didn't end well. I don't remember everything that was said, but it escalated very quickly and ended with him hitting me. My dad hit me so hard that he actually broke my right cheekbone. My mom rushed me to the hospital, and I was coached saying that I was accidentally hit by a doorknob, which I eventually had to repeat the same thing to CPS. After a week back from the hospital, my mom and dad revealed to me that he was actually my stepdad. When they were in college, my mom was dating a guy who she said was a real asshole. When they found out that she was pregnant, he left her, but my stepdad stepped up and did everything that he could, and they put his name on my birth certificate. My mom then explained that when I confronted my stepdad that it really hurt him and lashed out in anger. It was wrong and they both asked for forgiveness. I unfortunately agreed. We seemed to go back to being a somewhat normal family again, but I began to notice things that I didn't before. Whenever my younger siblings needed something, my mom and stepdad would drop everything to help them. Meanwhile, I was told to figure it out myself. For birthdays, I would get next to no attention, usually just a hug from my mom. I didn't even get a cake after I turned 6. Meanwhile, my siblings would get a party, and the works pulled out for them. My stepdad would come back from work and wanted nothing to do with me. Even as a little kid, I was a massive nerd who wanted to go to museums and all those nerdy kid things and had zero interest in sports. My brothers were the exact opposite, and he spent much of his free time playing or watching sports with them. If my brothers wanted to go to see a game or something, my stepdad would move heaven and earth to bring them and usually drag me along. If I wanted to see the new Devonian fossil exhibit at the local museum, then there was no way I could go because he was busy. Once he even told me, "Sorry, but that basketball game took up your entire entertainment budget this month." BTW, that was the same game that when he saw that I brought my copy of Cosmos. He threw it out because I shouldn't have brought a book to a family event. There were several more things my parents did that showed their favoritism when I was younger, but this is already going to be a long one. What I do want to point out is that this wasn't a new behavior that developed after the truth came out. This had been ongoing over the years, and I just chalked it to me being the eldest sibling. Middle school was absolutely hell. I was and still am an introvert who would usually rather be by himself reading than talking to people. In my old school, I was still the odd one out, but I didn't get singled out for it and had friends. At the public school, I was quickly singled out and bullied, which caused my mental health severely declined, and my parents refused to intervene because it would toughen you up. I was bullied, but I fought back, and then they became my friends. That's just how guys become friends. Of course, I am sure anyone here can assume correctly that the facility was about as helpful. I did try to fight back once, and all it did was got 3 different kids to gang up on me and suspended for 3 days. The only friend that I was able to make was an older kid called Devin. Devin was 3 years older than me, but he actually took sympathy on me and decided to protect me from my bullies. Over the next 3 years, my situation at home quickly began to decline. My younger siblings had picked up on my parents' apathy and my decreased confidence and began to harass me. If they wanted something I had, they took it. They would call me names and would play pranks on me, which when I told my parents told me I needed to lighten up. Needless to say, this did not help my situation. My parents also became extremely harsh on me, and I did get beaten from time to time. Towards the end of my first year of middle school, I came home from the library, and I saw a letter from the middle school that I wanted to go to. I immediately opened. It was a letter declining the application for YB1 and YS. I did not see anything for me, so I went to my parents. They punished me for opening their mail, but when I pushed it, they told me that YB1 and YS did more to deserve going to that middle school. Mind you, at this time, and before I had near perfect grades. When I argued that if they could afford to send YB1 and YS, then I should be able to go. I was beaten for talking back and opening my parents' mail. I will be honest, during this time, I did try self-harm. Whenever I did, my situation would briefly improve. I became the center of my parents' world, teachers would intervene to stop the bullying, and even some of the kids at school would begin to be friendly to me. But after a week, things would quickly slide back. The only person who was actually they for me in my life was Devin. One day during the early part of 8th grade, I broke down and told Devin about my biological father. I had been having thoughts about why he abandoned me when he found out. How it was partially his fault that my life was the way it was. There was a lot else I said, but that was the key part. During my venting session, I revealed that my mum had let my dad's first and last name slip recently, and I knew his name. So, Devin offered help me research my dad. That day, Devin and I went to his house and began to essentially cyberstalk him. My bio dad was, still is, a college professor at a research university, about 200-ish miles from where we lived. We also found that he was married, and I learned I had another younger sister, and my stepmom was pregnant. That night, Devin and I hatched a plan, which we would carry out the following day. I came to school, and as soon as I stepped off the bus, I went the high school student parking lot and got into Devin's car, and we left. We arrived at the university around noon. After parking, Devin immediately went to the student center and asked which office my dad worked at and got directions. We went there, and he was gone on lunch, but when he came back about an hour later, he saw us sitting outside his office and asked who we were. I remember asking for his name and then asking if he knew my mom. When he confirmed both, I told him who I was and that I believed I was his son. I just wanted to say, as chessy as it sounds to me looking back, it is Devin who coached me on that. Bastard probably just watched a bad Hallmark drama or something. I remember that he immediately hugged me warmly and started saying, "Oh my God," over and over. He immediately brought us in his office to talk and cancelled his classes for the day. After that, Devin left, and my dad took me home and introduced me to his family. My stepmom was surprised. She knew my dad had a son, but a 13-year-old popping out of nowhere is kind of a surprise. Then they explained what happened. According to my dad, he was dating my mom during their senior year of college when she told him that she was pregnant. He and my mom were having problems in their relationship, and he suspected that she was cheating on him. He was planning on breaking up with her when she had told him. He honestly suspected that it was an attempt to stay together. So he told her that he would be willing to do a paternity test and co-parent, but that he refused to be in a relationship. Turns out that my mom was cheating on him with my stepdad, and when he had a much more positive response, she cut contact with my dad. When my dad married my stepmom, he told her that he may have had a child, and they decided to look my mom up on Facebook and saw a few pictures of me. Remember how I have no significant features with my mom or stepdad? Turns out I look almost identical to my dad. So he knew immediately. He had reached out to my mom via FB, but she immediately blocked him. He had considered getting a lawyer, but figured it would be all but impossible to get custody or even visitation rights without a paternity test, which my mom and stepdad could have blocked. I told him everything that my mom and stepdad had put me through, even more than what had been said above. When I finished, I was crying, and my stepmom was consoling me. After it was all out, my dad wordlessly stood up, went into the next room, and called a lawyer, and then called the police. The police, social services, and CPS all showed up and took me into custody. To summarize everything, I was taken out of my mom's and stepdad's custody and became a temporary ward of the state. A paternity test was taken, and it confirmed everything that my dad told me. Then I was placed into my dad and stepmom's care, and I was given a restraining order until I reached the age of 18. I won't pretend that everything was perfect. Looking back on it, I did cause some strain on my dad's marriage because he immediately favored me over my half-siblings. My dad and stepmom did recover, and they placed sensible boundaries. I was enrolled in a much better school where I was able to make real friends. I never forgot Devon. We stayed in contact, but due to the distance, our contact isn't as consistent as it used to be. We still talk regularly, though. Devon is doing well. After high school, he became an underwater welder for an oil company, which apparently pays really well. We have met for drinks and to catch up. I asked him why he protected me. He said he wasn't sure, but for whatever reason, when he saw me getting bullied, it just caused something to snap. He also said that he kind of saw me as someone who needed a big brother figure in his life and that it was the right thing to do. After high school, I went on to college and I was fairly popular as my confidence had been completely rebuilt. I majored in biology and minored in geology. I am currently a PhD student working in paleontology. I love it. I get to go on university-sponsored digs. Normally they are in the States, but last year I got to go to South Africa and Namibia. My mom and stepdad reached out to me a few months ago to try and get me to help tutor YB2 and YS. YS had dropped out of college a few years ago because it was too difficult for her, although she wanted to go back and finish her program. And YB2 wants to get into a good college next year, but doesn't have to grades and wants help studying for the acts. During that conversation, I noticed my heart was beating out of control and that I was having difficulty breathing. I am certain that it was a panic attack, but I had never had anything like that, so I just hung up on my mom and sat on the couch. The following day, I began to receive a couple of texts from my mom's kids asking for help and blocked all of their numbers. Afterwards, I didn't hear from them until I received a barrage of emails from them on my university email. Essentially, each they were apologizing for how they treated me and that they wanted to fix things so we could be a family. Originally, I had decided that I wanted to send an email back telling them that I wanted no further contact and that even hearing from them was casing a traumatic response over a decade later, and that I feel the only reason that they are reaching out is because they want a free tutor. I never sent it. Instead, I decided simply to block them. In April, I went on a dig in Texas and received a call from the police telling they had been called to my apartment because they had been told that someone had broken in. It was YB1 trying to get in contact with me. I told the police that he was not supposed to be there and that I would like trespassing charges pressed. As it was a first offense, he was able to plea bargain it down to 100 hours of community service. I got back home at the end of May, and I haven't heard from them yet. I think that they got the idea and decided to stop contacting me. Regardless, I have a strong relationship with my dad. We have spent a long time building that relationship and make up for lost time. I have a good relationship with my younger half-siblings from my dad and stepmom. I play with them and spend a lot of time with them, but there is a fairly big age gap between us. My stepmom and I are on good terms. I'm not sure how to describe our relationship, but I would say that, while she didn't completely replace the role of a mom in my life, she did become a motherly figure. I have no idea if that makes sense, but it is the best way I can phrase it. I am not entirely sure how to end this. There might be something like a message here, but probably not. I really did just feel that I should share my story. Although I have been sitting here and after initially writing this, when I was recalling the abuse I suffered and started to proofread it, I started to feel extremely anxious. I think that I may have some suppressed trauma and will be looking to get therapy.